Hi everyone, and welcome to the next video. Today I'm going to be going over some of my fish keeping hot takes. This will likely be a multi-part series. I'm also going to do a set of videos of this similar style for dogs and then just pets in general. So without further ado, let's get into it. To start, I think fish are just way too easy to acquire. Most people don't know the first thing about how to care for easier to keep, hardier species, and yet a lot of the readily available species that you can find at even just PetSmart require just way more care or space than the average fish keeper is able to provide. I think there are just far too many plecos and Oscars available than there are people to care for them properly. And the fact that PetSmart doesn't sell tanks big enough for these species does not help that. Related to the last one, I don't think fish should be advertised as a beginner pet. Not only is the idea of a beginner pet flawed to begin with, as everyone is different and can handle a different level of care or has a different level of space in their house to be able to care for an animal, fish require just way more care than most people are aware of. It's common knowledge that dogs need training, but it's not necessarily common knowledge that fish tanks require cycling and certain water parameters to make it healthy for a fish to live in. On top of that, a lot of people are just severely undereducated about proper tank sizes, compatibility, or even school size of certain species. I see a lot of people say that they have a Coolie Loach or like 2 Neon Tetras, and those are species that require 6 of each to feel even vaguely comfortable in their tank. Even when you're getting a cat or a dog, you are generally required to prove that you have the space and the ability to care for them, so why not the same for fish? Next up, I think short-finned or wild-type betas should just be way more common than the long-fin betas. A lot of long-fin betas have a hard time swimming properly, and therefore have a harder time thriving in larger tanks. The shorter-fin varieties are a lot easier to incorporate into a community tank because you don't have to worry as much about their fins being nipped or getting cut on the hardscape. Related to that, overall, I just think betas are kind of boring. They're really overdone. You can find like 30 plus of them at any pet store, and I think more people should be considering things like gouramis or more interesting centerpiece fish. I think due to the popularity of betas, their breeding practices have really just tanked, and in general, they're very unhealthy. A lot of the ones that I've had have ultimately ended up passing of cancer, and therefore, at the very least, we should be advocating for better breeding practices. But I do think people just overall should be considering other centerpiece species because there's way more fish out there than just betas. Next, being in the hobby for longer does not necessarily mean you are more educated or more experienced. The length of time you have been doing something means next to nothing if you've spent that entire time doing it wrong. I've had fish since I was very young, equaling over 20 years ago now, and it wasn't until like the last 8 years or so that I started doing proper research and caring for my fish properly. And even then, I'm sure there's still things I could be doing better. This should be a learning experience regardless, but if you start pulling the whole, well, I've been doing this for 35 years thing, I'm immediately just gonna stop listening because that means next to nothing to me. Sure, you may have been doing it for a while, even longer than I've been alive, but have you been doing it properly that entire time? Length of time does not equal education. This next one may not be a hot take for the fish community online, but just for the general public, it is way easier to care for a larger tank than it is a smaller tank. If your parameters get even slightly messed up in a smaller tank, say one of your fish or snails dies, you're gonna have a way harder time dealing with an ammonia spike because it is going to spike up faster. Whereas if you have a far bigger tank and a fish or 2 dies due to the amount of water that you have, it is unlikely to have a huge effect on the water parameters, and therefore you don't have to panic and fix it as soon as you can. Another one for the general public, getting pissed at people for shipping fish just shows that you have no idea what you're talking about. Anytime I go on TikTok and I see people talking about having fish shipped to their house, it is full of comments of people shaming them for having a fish shipped to them instead of just going to their local pet store. How exactly do you people think those fish get to the pet store in the first place? Because they sure as hell are not breeding them on site. I've actually had better luck getting fish shipped to my house versus going to a pet store, because if I go to a pet store, not to say that this wouldn't be the case for some of the places that you are getting them shipped from, but if I go to a pet store, I find that a lot of the fish there are sick or just not as healthy as I'd like them to be, whereas if I get them shipped to me, oftentimes I don't find that they're terribly sick. I find that a lot of the breeders that I buy from online are far more reputable than any of the pet stores near me, and I far prefer to have them shipped to me. Next one, I don't drip acclimate, and I probably never will unless I get fish where salinity level is important. I simply just float the bags for like 20 minutes to an hour in order to acclimate the temperature, and then I dump the fish into a net so I get rid of all of the old water, and then I put those fish in my tank. Because I often get fish shipped to me, those fish have been sitting in and defecating in this stagnant, unfiltered water for the last few days, and I would prefer to get them out of that as fast as possible and get them into my clean, filtered tank. Of course, I do this the moment they aren't at risk of temperature shock, but I've never had an issue doing this unless the fish were already sick prior to arriving to me. Next up, I don't think glowfish are necessarily unethical at this point, as they are now bred to have that color as opposed to being modified to have that color. And from what I've gathered, the color doesn't seem to have too much of an effect on their health, but I personally just think they're really ugly and tacky. You probably won't catch me ever getting them. They kind of just look like someone drew on a fish with a highlighter, and I prefer my tanks naturalistic. I can't do it. And lastly, kind of related to the last one, I hate the balloon or short body morphs of any fish, such as rams or mollies. I do think that those ones are also ugly, but from what I've gathered, they are not particularly known for being healthy, and often seem to die of having swim bladder problems or digestive issues, but I'm unsure if that's related to their shape or if that's just due to the environment that they're raised in. But it does seem that they are often outcompeted for food by normal shaped fish in the same tank. This seems to set unsuspecting buyers up for disappointment when their fish dies early. That'll be all for today. If there's any hot takes that you have, feel free to put them in the comments. I might make videos on those ones as well. Again, this will probably end up being a multi-part series, so this likely will not be the last you hear of my hot takes. But thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.